Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. I am very excited to introduce you to my two guests. So it's always a lot of fun when I have two people on, and we are going to be talking about near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences today. If you don't know what the term UAP or the acronym stands for, you're going to learn about that. We're also going to learn about the anomalous prone personality. This is going to be a show packed with really extraordinary experiences. So my two guests today are the co-authors of the book. If you're watching this on Path 11 TV, you'll be able to see the cover of it. It is called Convergence, the Interconnection of Extraordinary Experiences. My guests today are Barbara Mango and Lynn Miller. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Hello, thank you.
Yes, I am so excited to talk to you guys. You guys both come with, like I said before we started the show, amazing bios, right? I mean, just the amount of education between the two of you is phenomenal. Your personal experiences together are phenomenal. So I'm so excited that you guys decided to write a book. And we will have all of your credentials in the show notes, but I thought it would be a lot quicker and much more interesting if you guys could give our listeners a little bit more of your background and kind of what brought you into writing this book together. And you both have really personal experiences that I'd love you both to share as well. And then we'll get into some of the really good stuff that you have here in your book. So, Barbara, why don't we start with you and let's go with a little bit more of your background and how you kind of came to where you are in writing this book, Convergence.
My background really, and I want to stress, is that I'm an experiencer above and beyond anything. I had my first experience when I was 2 years old. By the time I was 13, I had had four of probably some of the most impactful experiences of my life. They shaped who I was. I looked at life and the afterlife differently than most kids. I understood that we're more than our physical body. And I understood that we never die. And so that's kind of a different perspective for a little kid, you know? And,
Absolutely.
So just really quickly, it was really hard for me to navigate that growing up, and I couldn't talk about it. And I had to stifle it. So going forward, that was sort of the driving force of my life. You know, I had to compartmentalize it no matter what I did, no matter what job I had, no matter what I was doing. But that to me was always the essence and the core of who I was. So I did many jobs. I worked in education. Believe it or not, I worked in corporate travel. I did all kinds of things. But in 2007, I had a really bad fall, and I broke part of my back. So I had a period where I was just healing and I couldn't do anything physical. And I was thinking to myself, you know, what can I do? Like, how can I revamp my life? You know, because I think when you're hurt or you're in a capacity where you can't be physical, right? You have to draw on something else. And I thought to myself, you know, I've been doing all these other things my whole life, but oh my gosh, wow, maybe this is a chance to go back to quote who I really am. Because I think that's part of my journey really, is to remember who I am and why I came into this world, right? So I started looking at programs, master's degree programs, PhDs, and I found this incredible program in metaphysics, and it was offered through a theological university, a very progressive theological university. So I spent the next 7 years. It took a long time, you know, and got my PhD. And did a lot of writing, contributed a few books, and then became involved where I met Lynn. This is where I met Lynn in the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, which was investigating the correlation between consciousness and different contact modalities. We were both on the research team. We met, we clicked, and we said to ourselves, gee, here's really hard science that these people are investigating, but most of them are not experiencers or scientists or academics. And some of them have had maybe one or two experiences, but they're still trying to prove it from, you know, that scientific hardcore manner. And we thought, you know, wow, we have sort of the opposite perspective, right? We're scientists, especially Lynn, she is the hard science. We're experiencers, so we can kind of marry those two. And we have more experiences than what is just being talked about. So let's go ahead with that and share it and make ours more a personal narrative. And that's sort of how the book came about.
Awesome. Great. So, Lynn, let's bring you in. Let me hear a little bit more about your background up until you met Barbara and some of your experiences that you've had.
Yeah, I was a strange little kid growing up. I grew up in Texas, and I was a nature's kid. I would wander off from the house in the desert and looking for horned-toed lizards and all kinds of snakes and stuff. I love nature. I also had some really strange dreams about the Mayan pyramids and certain types of the old stuff in Mexico, which made a lot of sense to me at that time because, I grew up on the border of Mexico. And so I had all these strange dreams. And in these dreams, I was able to move things with my mind, and I could speak to other entities and things like that. I never really quite understood really what that was about. So I grew up being very interested in the paranormal. I was also very interested in astronomy. I had some telescopes, very interested in extraterrestrials and aliens. So, that's sort of how, I grew up. Of course, as you get older, life happens. You go to school, you get married and things like that. So I sort of veered away from that. Now in college, I was still very interested in the brain because of the paranormal stuff. So I ended up majoring in psychology and biology. And then, I would have, as I got to be, let's say, in my preteens, I did start having some really strange experiences. And those are probably what I would recognize as the spontaneous out of body experiences, the OBEs. And they just sort of felt normal to me. And, I went through my life thinking, okay, well, this is, I guess everybody has these. But they would be really strange. Like I would be in an apartment and I left my body and I walked down the hall and went into somebody else's apartment. And I remember looking around and I'm thinking, this is so real. So I knew there was something more to this. So, I did a little, I was in the military for a little while, and then I became a military spouse. Then I ended up getting my master's degree in biology. So I did some work in my field for a while. I was a microbiologist. I also taught at a couple of colleges. And then later in life, in 2001, I had my one and only daughter. And I wanted to look into something a little bit more family friendlier. So I got into public teaching, into high school teaching. I was at first teaching science, and then later I became certified in art. So now I'm an art teacher. So I'm having a lot of fun. So that sort of led up to the point about 3-4 years ago. That's how I ended up going onto Facebook and finding the site about the Edgar Mitchell Foundation. So that's sort of how me and Barbara left. So that's how we kind of got up to the present moment where we are at now.
Great. So I also want to talk about, I'd like to know from both of you because, Barbara, I love the term that you said, like, we are experiencers. Mm-hmm. What was one of the most pivotal experiences, extraordinary experiences that both of you have had? Because I know that my listeners are probably like, ask them about that. People love to hear these stories because it just begins what I feel. It begins to open up our minds to think, well, maybe that's possible for me to have an experience like this, So Barbara, let's go with you first. And what would you say has been one of your kind of just pivotal, mind-blowing paranormal experiences that you had that just left you wanting more and really wanting to investigate more and have these questions answered?
I would say the most pivotal and impactful experiences of my life, and the ones I've had the most frequently, have been spontaneous past life recall. And the really amazing one happened when I was 6 years old, because I not only had a spontaneous physical healing, I had a spontaneous phobic healing. And as adults, we read about that and we're like, yeah, okay. But to actually go through it, it was amazing. I'm going to try to really compact the story, because it happened over two days, this recall. But basically, when I was a small child, I was 6 years old in real life. I was in first grade, and I had pneumonia. And back then, they might have had better treatments now, but I had been to the pediatrician back and forth. And he kept prescribing every antibiotic, every breathing treatment, everything they had back then, but nothing was working. And I missed 50 days of school. And it was so frustrating for me. I was a good student, and just to sit at home, I was going crazy. So I remember the principal calling my parents and saying, a child can only miss 52 days of school. And if they miss any more than that, they're held back. And my parents were freaking out. I started crying. I was like, oh my God, I can't be held back. That's just stigma. And I was a good student. So I was just beside myself. So later that evening, I got into bed, but I wasn't asleep. I wasn't asleep at all. And all of a sudden, just like boom, I was in a past life. So I didn't question that I was in a past life. I knew I was in a past life, because there's so many aspects, and these are the aspects that all experiencers talk about. It was realer than real than real. It was in at least 6 dimensions. I knew historical information that I couldn't possibly know as a 6-year-old. I was seeing things, oh my gosh, like omnidirectional vision. So basically what happened is I remembered that I lived in England, and the year 1905 popped up in front of me, like almost like, letters. And I knew I lived in a town called Derbyshire, which is in northern England. I think it's called not the hill country, but something like the lake country. And I had some horrible trauma in my family, and I had been taken away from the family for a short period of time. And in the remembrance, I was being driven back home after a period of being away. So immediately I'm aware that I'm Barbara in a 6-year-old body, laying on my bed. I mean, I feel physically the bed. I know I'm me. At the same time, I'm like an eagle bird's eye view of a little girl who is my age. She's also 6 years old. I knew that. And she's being driven home by her chauffeur, because she's incredibly wealthy. And she's sitting in like this British touring car, like a convertible, and she's looking at the scenery, and I'm feeling like the spring air, in my face. I can smell the flowers that she's smelling. I see her from above, like a bird's eye view, while I'm also becoming her. I'm in her body now. And I'm looking around, while I'm seeing her from a bird's eye view as Barbara, I also become her. And I'm looking around and I see the homes, but I'm also feeling her feelings. And that was so impactful, yet difficult for me, because she was so sad. She was so traumatized. And I was trying to figure out what's going on with her. Why is she so traumatized? So finally she gets back to her home, and her older sister comes out and meets her at the door, and she gets out of the car. And then she remembers, or is told, that the reason she was taken away from the home is because her father, who was very wealthy, it was awful. He was killed, but he was stabbed to death. And her mother, who had always been very emotionally fragile, had been taken away. And at that time, I guess they called them, I don't know the proper, politically correct term, but a facility or whatever. And then I also had a memory that flashed like 30 years later. It was the end of my life. And I Same deal. I was like in my late 40s, I think. And I saw myself again. I was Barbara and still a 6-year-old looking at this tall, willowy, really pretty blonde woman in a manor home, stately manor home. And she was on her bed, devastated. I mean, I was looking at her again from a bird's eye view. I was just ridiculous vision. And I also became her. And the heaviness in my heart, the despair, the loneliness, the fear. She had just been back from her physician who had told her she was dying of terminal lung cancer. And it was, so here I am having this vision, this memory, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm 6 years old. How can I know this? What am I supposed to do with this? I can't handle the feelings of a person dying. It was just incredulous to me that I had multidimensional vision. It was incredulous to me that I could be two people at once in two, like, transcending time, space, right? Heightened sensors. It was amazing, but overpowering. So the next morning, when I got up, I was perfectly fine. I wasn't wheezing. I wasn't coughing. I had no fever. My lungs felt great. I said to my mom, I want to go to school today. I'm ready. I'm perfect. I want to go to school today. She goes, no, we're not going to school until we take you to the doctor. So I went to the doctor and he said, she's fine. Like, I see no signs of like, there's no bronchitis, there's no pneumonia. She's fine. She can go to school. And he goes, I don't understand how this happened. Like, this isn't inexplicable to me. And I'm sitting there in my little 6-year-old mind going, I know. It's because I remembered how I died in my last life, and it was upper respiratory. And whatever reason that I had needed until that point to hold that in my physical or etheric or astral body or energetic body, I no longer needed it. I had remembered it. I had released it. And I also had this insanely ridiculous fear of knives. Like, really, if I would see a sharp knife as a child, I'd start sweating and shaking, and I couldn't go near it. And I remember one time my mom was making dinner with a really big, chopping knife, right? I ran out of the room. I couldn't even look at one. So again, when I got up the next morning, it was like, oh, a knife. Okay, big deal. Because I had that memory of my father. Unfortunately, it's, not a good memory of him being stabbed to death. And again, I think it just released whatever I had been holding on to karmically, energetically, in every different layer of body that I had. And I no longer needed to carry it in this lifetime. So between the realness, the heightened senses, the omnivision, the knowing about historical eras and periods that I could possibly have known, it was incredibly impactful. And then I was like, I get it. Spontaneous healing. So,
right. Wow, what a fascinating story. And it reminds me a little bit too of, people doing past life regressions and having those spontaneous healings with physical ailments, because it is connected to a past life and how they died or what they suffered from in that past life. So, wow, thank you, Barbara. That was amazing. Yeah. Okay, Lynn, let's go to you. What was your most really mind-blowing paranormal experience that you have had?
Well, first of all, it began in 2006. And in this time, it was April of 2006. I was teaching in Carruthersville, Missouri, and a lot of tornadoes swept through our area and pretty much destroyed our school. So we were on a very prolonged spring break, and I happened to watch this movie called What the Bleep Do We Know? I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
As I was watching this, it's like my whole entire paradigm just shifted. It was like, okay, this is it. I always knew that there were answers of all these types of real amazing paranormal phenomena, and What the Bleep explained that. So I started doing a lot of researching. That is when I started, reading about all the authors, getting books. I started to do meditations, and I noticed that as I was increasing my spirituality in the meditations, that the out-of-body experiences were happening even more. And at that time, even though I knew what they were, I was sort of refused to believe it because, I have a very science mind. And I always felt like it was a little bit too woo-woo for me. It's like astral projection, no way, you know. So I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and I happened to come up on one by William Buhlman.
Oh yeah,
Familiar master of OBEs.
yeah.
Yes, and every word that he said just brought chill bumps to me. It was amazing because it's like he is explaining everything that's happening to me because I was experiencing extreme vibrational states where, and that's a prelude to an OBE, and it would be so pronounced. It's like there was a jet engine in my head. And during this time, I remember opening my eyes and I was inches away from the ceiling. So, I was in an out of body state, and I'm thinking that this is so much weirdness. So yes, I started reading his books. I went on to his forum, and I started to practice controlled out of body experiences because that's what it's all about. So I will explain my first real out of body experience, controlled, because I've had so many amazing ones. But this one it sort of just shook the foundation that I was on. It was even though it was very simple, I did the wake back to bed technique where I, went to bed. I got up about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, did some meditation, did some intention, and I was listening to binaural beats, which is sort of like a sound that kind of helps you get into a meditative state. And all of a sudden, here comes the vibrations, like that. And I'm thinking, oh, it's happening. It's really, really happening. And I just sort of just set up and I stood next to my bed and I was looking down at my body and I was laughing. It's like, this is really happening. And I took my hand and I put it through my body. I touched myself laying in bed and my hand went through my body. And it's like, I felt this little tingly vibration. And I was so ecstatic. And so I was just laughing. He's saying, this is real. This is really working. I was laughing. And of course, when you really concentrate on your physical body, that's a sure sign that you're going to snap right back into it. So boom, I was right back into my body. I opened my eyes and I was just laughing. It was like, this is for real. And from then on, I did, I practiced the controlled out of body experiences. And, I've met my spirit guides. I've met other types of entities. I've been to other worlds. I've been to outer space and the moon and all kinds of amazing things. But it's been some of the most amazing experiences that have changed my life.
Yeah, I would say, for the very first time I met William Buhlman, and, he's in all 3 of our documentaries. Like all my beliefs, it's like flown out of the water. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this now. It just opened up a whole new world of consciousness, for me, as did your book and what you guys wrote here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to go.
Yes, William Buhlman is my grand poobah.
Yeah, sorry. He's what I like about his work is that it's so practical, right? It's like he gives you that step by step and, just like really easy techniques. So like it doesn't have to be hard, and you follow those techniques, and everybody that I know that has tried his techniques have success.
That's great. And anybody who wants to learn more about them, and there's some great authors out there, but he's the one that I would definitely suggest because that man, he rocked my world. I mean, he changed my life. He really did.
He changed mine too. I hear that. Second it. So when I went through your book, I wanted to go over some concepts that were very new to me. They may not be new to my listeners, but they were new to me. And it started off right with chapter 2 in your book and the anomalous prone personality. So who would like to take this question? And can you kind of talk about this so my listeners can get an idea if they kind of fit into that?
I can answer that. Lynn had the dual major of psychology and science. And for a while, in one of my many incarnations, I was going back to graduate school for counseling, never matriculated. So both of us are very, very interested in psychology. And I've always been drawn to abnormal psychology. But what drew me to that is because, like I said before, I was a small child. I was 2 years old when I started having these experiences. And I did have the awareness that that wasn't normal. Do you know? I mean, I was a very small child. I was a very weird child. That age, I had that awareness, right? But I did. I would look at other little kids playing and I'd say, wait a minute. I'm not like you. I'm having these deep thoughts and I'm meeting with spirit guides and they're telling me all kinds of information and explaining the universe, but I should be playing with dolls. So the point is, I always knew I was different. I tried sharing some of my experiences once with my mom when I was little, and she told me in a very just completely like shut me down way, you're making it up, you're lying, you like attention, that's not true, like stop saying these things. So I had to stifle them. And I had to try to make sense of them by myself. I couldn't talk to them about with my friends because they didn't get it. They thought I was weird. So as we were researching the book and in my reading for my dissertation, I came across Kenneth Ring, is an NDE researcher, but he also did some beginning research on the personalities that are prone to having NDEs. And he found there's a very strong correlation. So I did some more research and I came across a different, more comprehensive type of personality called an anomalous prone personality type. And basically what that means, anomalous could be spiritual, paranormal. It's just a broad base for it. But what it means is it's not just people that have near-death experiences that have these personality types. It's all of us who have any of the above-mentioned experiences, right? And not everybody fits into this, but most of us do. And one of the main things is our childhood, which of course is very impactful. Most of us come from very difficult childhoods. There can be abuse. It can be sexual, physical, or emotional, or combination of the above. We can have witnessed one extremely traumatic event in our lives. We could come from a very, unstable home. Say one parent, is an alcoholic, something like that. That's just an example. And we also have the tendency to dissociate. That's just, to fantasize and dissociate. But again, like I always say, well, is that really a trait or is that a psychological coping mechanism? It happens such a difficult home, right? Because it is. So I see it as sort of either or. We tend to be extremely creative and imaginative. We think outside the box. These are really good traits, but at the same time, they can make it difficult for other people to, sometimes to fit in. We don't feel like we fit in with others. We're very independent. We're very ethically driven. Like we have very, very strong ethics where we don't deal well with judgment or rigidity. We always tend to be introverts rather than extroverts. Excuse me. The other thing I wanted to say is there's a subset too, which is called the highly sensitive person, which is just a subset. And that means, and it doesn't just mean we're ultra sensitive, which we all know what that means. I'm sure many of us have heard, oh, you're so sensitive. Well, we are. We're incredibly empathic. We're incredibly, sensitive, caring, loving people. Yeah, that's true. But it means more than that. It means we're also sensitive to the environment, to electromagnetic fields. And so we are much more prone to feeling the effects of that Sometimes it makes us feel sick. We get headaches. We have trouble processing too much external stimuli, that kind of thing. We tend to actually have more illnesses, more operations. It sounds crazy, but we're actually sensitive to that. But on the flip side, we have an effect, we affect the sensitivity of electronic equipment. That could be one of the reasons I can't use my computer today. When I walk by lights, they tend to flicker on and off. I blow out electronic equipment a lot. So we take in the environment and it affects us physically, psychologically, physiologically, but at the same time, we can have an impact on the environment. So I found that very, very fascinating. And as Lynn and I were going through this, we're like, check, 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 check. And I don't think there was one single area that we didn't check. So we really wanted viewers and readers to look at this and say, you know what? I felt like I was weird and I didn't fit in my whole life. But you know what? Let's reframe that. This is normal for me. This is non-pathological. And look at all these really cool treats that go with it. And let's flip that around from being weird and feeling like an outsider to thinking, gee, maybe I can reframe and say, I'm unique. I'm going to own this. And this is really who I am. And it's a gift.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And I bet you the majority of the listeners are also going, check, 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 check. That's me. That's me. Yeah. Wonderful. All right, Lynn, how about, would you like to cover what UAPs stand for? And I tend to call UAPs. Yeah. UAP. What is that?
That's unidentified aerial phenomenon. Okay. So, I'm trying to think, why did they change it? It's kind of like a big, when the government started to accept, or when the government started to admit that there were unexplained phenomenon, they wanted to change that name. So it was unidentified flying objects to unidentified aerial phenomenon, because it kind of encompasses a broader range of things besides just little shiny spaceships. So yeah, that's the new thing. I prefer to call them UFOs, just because that name has been around forever and people can identify more with that. So especially with what's going on lately, because it's been in the news, and it's been in national news now about those recordings of I think they've little tic-tac shaped little ships flying, going into the water. So yeah, in the UFO field, it's buzzing. It's huge. And it prompted a report that Congress did, and that was only a couple of weeks ago that they submitted a report. And basically they're saying, well, we don't know what this is. It is not, it's nothing that the United States is doing. It's nothing that is coming from China or Russia, because they thought, okay, well, this could be China or Russia. So they're admitting that it's nothing of an earthly origin, yet they're still not admitting that it's a possible extraterrestrial origin. So that's sort of what's going on right now.
Yeah. Why did you guys find it important to kind of cover some of this in the book? What were some of the highlights there?
Yeah. Okay. Well, for one thing, we've talked about out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, past life experiences, and in many of these, they really do have connections to the UAP, which is actually just not looking at UAPs. We're actually talking about contact experiences with other entities. Okay. So, one thing that I really noticed, and especially with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation, is that people who have had out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, telepathy, all this kind of stuff, visions, are having contact with what they believe to be extraterrestrials. And I mean, it is a very commonality. It really, really is. And, and that's sort of what the book is about, is that, we're having these experiences, but they're interconnected, very interconnected, which is via non-local consciousness. So our consciousness is non-local, and that is the commonality that we're sharing with other types of entities, whether they be what we call non-human intelligent beings, or interdimensional beings, or extraterrestrials. Because, I mean, if you think that humans are able to have out-of-body experiences and all these amazing things, you can imagine what a civilization can do that is millions of years ahead of us. So yes, there's so many people, and that's one thing that I noticed, because I have read thousands of other people's experiences, because I've been on forums and a lot of Facebook groups. I've learned myself so much from other experiencers, because that's how I've learned. And many of them are having contact with extraterrestrials. So, that is how that comes into. And it really is, a lot of times it could be very scary for some people and very frightening. And they think, well, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why aren't they contacting, the president of the United States? It's like, it's not about that, It's like, we are the people who they want to contact, so that's the connection with UAP. So I've had the experiences of seeing other entities and what I believe to be extraterrestrials. And I really feel like my guides and my family are from other worlds, in alternate and previous lives. And Barbara has had a pretty amazing UAP experience also. So that's my part.
Great. And before I move over to Barbara and ask her about her UAP experience, Lynn, when you have met these interdimensional beings or extraterrestrials yourself, was there anything to be feared?
Oh my gosh, absolutely not. It's as if I've known them for millions of years. It's like they're my family, they're my friends, they're my home. I've had so many visions of looking up in the sky and looking at the stars and seeing ships, and it's like I feel like I'm wanting to go home. I've had absolutely no fear. I think that some people who don't understand what's happening, and if they maybe had a first experience this time, there can definitely be a fear factor, because it's sort of difficult to understand. And that's one of the things I've tried to help people with, is trying to get over this fear, because it is very surprising. And, a lot of abduction scenarios can be very scary to people. And, so that's one thing that I've really tried to, help people with, to try to help them understand why it's happening.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Barbara, I think we have time for one more story. So would you like to explain your experience?
Sure. I have the same experience with Lynn I had absolutely no fear. I had telepathic communication, in which I was told that basically mine is more a stereotypical sighting, but much more than that. I was 10 years old. I was living in Kansas at the time. It was a gorgeous spring day. We were outside. My father and I were outside doing yard work. Homes are very close together in that area. So all the neighbors were doing yard work. They're so close, you can just go, hey, how are you? So there wasn't a cloud in the sky, one of those amazing days. And, I was looking down, raking, and all of a sudden it got really dark, just dark, like a very, very bad thunderstorm, right? And I couldn't understand why. And I looked up, and I remember my mouth just dropped open. There was a absolutely enormous cylindrical disc that was, again, I was a kid, but in retrospect, I would say between 1 to 2 football fields. It was enormous. It was perfectly round. It was like a matte silver. And even though it was above me and it wasn't high, I mean, you could see it so perfectly. I would say probably maybe a quarter of a mile into the sky or less. And it just stayed, hover. And even though I was looking above it, I could tell that there were little like windows around the, circumference. And I just stared and stared. And I just want to say that because I had been having experiences my whole life as a child, I always knew. I never doubted there wasn't life on other, planets or whatever, universes. It was inconceivable to me. And I had always said, oh my gosh, why are you visiting me? I want to visit. So the first thing I said is like, oh, thank God you're here. It's about time. And then I started getting telepathic communication. And it was the most natural thing in the world. I could not see any beings in the craft. It was too high. What they were saying to me, and I'll never forget, they were saying to me is, we came to you. We're talking to you because we know that you'll understand. We want to share 2 messages with you. And one of them is, to put it in easy terms, we come in peace. A lot of people don't understand us or are afraid of us. And we want you to let them know that that's not so. We're just a more advanced civilization. And we're here observing you. And then they said, just like you will be going to the moon and collecting lunar dust and stones and rocks from the moon and examining them and studying them and observing them. That's what we're doing with you. Now, this is before we went to the moon. This was years before we collected lunar dust or rocks. I had no idea what they were talking about. I'm like, what? And they said, so just keep that in mind because this will be happening. And I was like, okay. And they said, the other thing we're concerned about is your planet. You're not taking care of your planet. You really need to let people know. And as you go on your path, you need to be very cognizant of that. That's upsetting to us. And I was just really in the groove of this conversation. And the telepathy was the most normal thing in my life. It was just talking to you, it was so normal. And I kept staring. I never took my eyes off the craft, and then it was gone. It didn't move. It didn't accelerate. It was just gone. And I remember throwing down my rake, running over to my father and saying, Dad, I understand something. That craft moved faster than the speed of light because we weren't able to see it moving. And it also made no noise. So that meant it traveled faster than the speed of sound. And he looked at me and said, how do you know that? You haven't learned that in school. And I hadn't. I had no idea what that was. That's like physics or something, right? But I knew. I guess it was just another download that they had given me. And I just want to let you know that sighting has been verified that Project Blue Book. And it was the same day that I remember it happening. And this was one of the very few cases that they couldn't disprove because, they try to disprove the cases, whether it be, a small prop plane or a weather balloon or just a false sighting. This one was verified as true. So it was so nice years later that even though I knew, as sure as I know that, the sun exists, that this was true, but to actually find it in the declassified government information and verified as one of the few real, true sightings of that year, it was amazing.
Yeah, that must have also just been so validating for you as well. Like,
yes.
Not that you needed extra validation, but, to see it in print, and
it was amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So fascinating, ladies. I am so excited we got to talk about all these personal experiences.
Yeah.
I know we didn't dive too much fully into, the whole book, but a lot of this stuff, is explained in your book, other things that we didn't kind of get to, but that I think a lot of people will be interested in for those who have had OBEs or near-death experiences is the impact that people feel. You guys were able to collect a lot of data about, people becoming interested in psychic phenomenon, feeling curious, felt like their life was changed, developing a greater awareness of reality. So like you cover a lot of stuff. And the other thing that I feel about this book is that if anyone has had a sighting, an experience, a paranormal experience, a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience, I feel like this book is going to help people to not feel alone. Very similar to like Robert Monroe's books, and you also referenced Robert Monroe's information here too. It's like, by him coming out and kind of talking about his out-of-body experience, all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, that happened to me. So there's something really comforting as well with also the data that you collected. And I'm sure this is kind of like the science minds, that you guys have too, that this isn't just like this is what we think book. This is like filled with, information and good collected data and scientific research. So really, really wonderful. And I loved hearing your stories. And the other fascinating thing that I always am intrigued about, and this is happening with both of your stories too. Barbara, with you being so young at 6, you tell the story as if it happened yesterday and can still remember all of those details. Yeah, which I find with a lot of people that have experienced the near death, the out of body experiences, it's so different than a dream, because I know that we go into the dream state, we go out of body every single night, right? But when we come back, many times people will be like, in the first 5 minutes, I just had this dream, but I can't recall it.
Yeah.
And the fact that OBE in NDEers, and, even having these sightings or experiences with interdimensional beings and stuff like that, it's as if it's still happening like right now when people tell these stories.
Right.
So I think there's also something to that too, so really fascinating stories, ladies. Thank you so much. Where can people find the book? Where can they maybe contact you? Or if they want to just like ask you guys questions, what's the best place for people to get a hold of you and to pick up your book and read it?
Our book's available on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle. It's available at Barnes & Noble in both paperback and their version of Kindle, which is from Book Nook. It's available in lots of independent bookstores, the Book Depository. You can find it in a lot of places. Our hub actually for the book is our website, which is www.extraordinaryexperiences.org. And we write prolific blogs. We touch on a lot of these subjects so that readers really get a lot of information. There's a lot of information, personal experiences, and a lot of things we haven't talked about today. And also, upcoming events. I'll be speaking at the 2021 EINS conference that's coming up. It's going to be in September. So we have any media, any upcoming events we've posted on there. And Lynn, do you want to talk a little bit about our free downloadable book we just added?
Right. Yes. Like she said, our website is full of amazing blog articles. Barbara is a prolific writer, beautiful writer. So there's all kinds of great information there. But lately what we've done is we went ahead and did like a free ebook, and it's also at our site. So it's more about us. It's like, it goes into a lot of details. It's about Barbara's journey, and it goes into more about her experiences and how she lived her life. And then it goes into mine, and mine is particularly about my life through things that I've experienced through out-of-body experiences. So it's about like a little 42-page ebook. It's free, and it's just there if you're interested in getting to know more about stuff. So that's also at our website.
Wonderful. Well, ladies, thank you. This was mind-blowing. I had so much fun. And again, for our listeners, the book is Convergence, The Interconnection of Extraordinary Experiences, Barbara Mango and Lynn Miller. Google it, buy it, read it, go to the website, support it. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you guys next time. Linda and Barbara, thank you again for being on the Path 11 podcast.
Thank you so much. This was so
Thank you so much.